of people come to us generally when there's a problem.
Sure.
But in hypertension, like in almost all chronic diseases, ideally you make an impact before there's a problem. And so a lot of that has to do with lack of data, right? People don't use cuffs routinely. They've been around for 110 years, 50 years in the way that they are currently sold at every drugstore, but people just don't use them. Only 24% of people who have hypertension actually use a cuff more than once a week. And so it's sort of an astounding gap. And so part of the sort of rationale for our technology and our product and solution is to fill in gaps of monitoring and data delivery of hypertension so that we can really enable the whole sort of continuum of care from awareness, empowerment, engagement, diagnosis, treatment, and control in all aspects of hypertension.
Wait, I had a thought. I forgot. Oh, so are you cardiologist or nephrologist?
Cardiologist.
Oh, we were so close.
Who the hell would be
I was gonna like you so much. You know, cardiologists are nephrologists' arch nemesis.
Why? That doesn't make
But
any
you're
sense.
much better than
I create a lot of business
disease.
for you. I give all that Lasix, and then I call you for consult. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this.
All that contrast.
I gave them 14 boluses of contrast. Can you help?
Listen, you're still one step above infectious disease, so you're all right in my book. So this is probably going to be a high-level conversation.
The pandemic when you were hiding
excuse me. This is going to be a high-level conversation. We may have to bring it down to like a third grade level for Dr. Saggar.
Sounds great.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Recommend Daily Dose. I am your high-level host, Dr. Clenton Coleman, along with my third grade reading level colleague, Dr. Suraj Saggar. We have an amazing guest, Dr. Shah. He is a seasoned physician. I want to be seasoned one day, with over 15 years of progressive and diverse experience in the medical field. He currently is the Chief Medical Officer of Aktiia. Now, Aktiia empowers providers and patients to greatly improve the diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment of hypertension. So that's right up my alley as a hypertensive specialist. So welcome to the show, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on, Jay. We appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Yeah. So listen, there's obviously we'll start high level and then work our way down to nitty gritty. But first and foremost, I think it's great being involved in industry. As a physician, I think a lot of us think, okay, you go to med school, fellowship, residency fellowship, whatever it is that Clinton went to, online degree. And then, you kind of like pigeonhole into your career and you keep working until you drop dead in the hospital one day. But I think we see a lot of physicians now getting into a lot of different things, industry, consulting, advisory boards. So given that, given our own interest in these things, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I started out thinking, as probably a lot of physicians did, certainly as a, first generation American immigrant family, thinking that I would just want to be a practicing clinician. I thought it was a great career, and I don't think I was wrong about that. But I think there's been.
Let me ask you a question. What were your options? Was it like doctor, engineer, and doctor? Same thing as mine.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Yeah.
So unfair. It's unfair.
Maybe pharmacist and then back to doctor. Yeah. So.
Right. Exactly. Or dentist is like, you get on there. You get on.
You're slumming it.
You know what? All my friends that are dentists, they work a heck of a lot less.
It's great.
They seem a lot happier. So I think jokes on us.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought that way. I wanted to be a doctor since I was a child, and ended up going to medical school. And I loved my medical school training. It was, City General Hospital in Kansas City. So if anyone doesn't know that part of the country, think like Southside Chicago or South Central LA, a real sort of different experience from my,
So is that like a security net hospital, so to speak?
Yeah, it's prison ward, inpatient psychiatric hospital, routine sort of all the stuff that comes with, having a relatively, very diverse and indigent sort of care populations, all kinds of things. And it was great because as a medical student, they had such little staff and resources anyway that you were given, extreme levels of responsibility, probably sometimes too much. But it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun and really enjoyed, and found some great teachers and mentors there. And then by luck or chance or a combination of the both is and some skill probably, is ended up at Mass General Hospital in Boston for residency training, which for lack of better explanation, the best thing that happened to me there was that I met my wife. And so that was, I guess fate, or, meant to be. But I started that, as you mentioned before, that's where I really started seeing, the possibilities of a physician career,
right,
truly multiply. Because in my residency, my cohort, I would be sitting next to someone who had, basically started an NGO for the WHO in Africa and ran that for 7 years. And now they were my counterpart in residency. Or the person next to me, or my junior resident, was some fellow who developed some molecule and sold it to the government of Singapore, and now is here doing residency, and I'm supervising this person. So I started seeing these really amazing sort of career paths. And I would say 90% of the people in residency ended up doing non-clinical medicine from the get-go, consulting.
Oh, from the get-go, so not even finishing residency, but never necessarily practicing.
Straight away going to Bain or McKinsey or pharmaceutical companies, or starting a biotech, or inventing some drug or device and starting their own company. So that was really, the sort of opened my eyes to that. And in the end, I did my cardiology fellowship at Washington University. And then I, went out and did something really sort of probably from a different era. I went out and started my own practice from scratch.
How dare you?
Sort of...
Well, you know what? You're in good company, because both of us, while we're heavily affiliated with the hospital and have, administrative posts in the hospital, we both are still in private practice. So.
Yeah, that's it. And that, so you guys know this. I mean, I started from scratch. I had 2 EKG machines and an MA, and that was it, straight out of fellowship. And that was an education in and of itself. So, I built this sort of practice for cardiology. That's, pretty an unusual pathway, I think.
If you want to go to private practice, you would have would have joined someone as an associate.
Joined a hospital, clinic, group, big, sort of enterprise. But I loved it. I got 7 years. I sort of built that into a very busy, robust practice, and learned all kinds of aspects of the business of medicine, of just actually, how do you run a business? How do you, get referrals? How do you keep referrals? How do you diversify your business income stream, and really support the business in multiple ways. So it was a really great experience. And then sort of took another turn and went to the Mayo Clinic for the last 3 years of my clinical career, and sort of ran their thoracic aortic aneurysm practice, which is sort of a very niche academic type of practice.
Was this Mayo in Minnesota, or was it like a satellite office?
No, I could not live in that. It's too cold.
So it was in Kansas or
Phoenix. Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix. I have family out there. Phoenix is play golf.
I'm learning now with my son. He wanted to pick it up, so I said, "Okay,
I said the T word," but my counterpart's gonna jump in here. He's usually wearing golf outfits.
Well, pickleball is Suraj's.
I play tennis, man. You do jazz.
Same thing.
I'll give it to you.
Pickleball is all over the place here, Suraj. Yeah, you could come. You guys be right at home.
So Mayo and Phoenix, excellent.
So Mayo and Phoenix, and then I did that for 3 years, and then over the last year, I just had an urge to try something different. I've been for now over 10 years practicing clinician full time. Never went part time. Never did anything else.
Yeah.
But I had this sort of urge to say, how could I now take that knowledge, take what I've gained over all this time and experience and diverse experiences, and how can I maybe impact a broader section of people? How can I have a bigger impact? And so I started looking, and it took me a while. I mean, it took about a year of really earnest searching, and it took a long time and a lot of effort and a lot of interviews and thinking through and really crossing things off. And then finally I happened upon this startup out of Switzerland, and I didn't know them at all. I just sent my resume in and LinkedIn, and it sort of happened, and one thing led to another. And now it's been a year and a half, and I've been chief medical officer. It's been great.
Are you doing this now full time? Because I think I alluded to in the beginning, I do some advisory work, but this is like, not even a part-time, it's a few hours a week, what have you. As a CMO, this is a full-time gig for you.
Yeah, I started, and as people have asked me, I would recommend trying to start part-time, because if you're making this transition, as you get a real sense of the people that you're working with. I think that's the most important thing is what's the team? Who are the people you're going to be working with? If you're going to leave this sort of what in clinical medicine to something else. So really getting to know the team, getting to know the product, getting to trust it, getting to understand the sort of the future state and what potential impact this can have. And then that took me about 9 months before I said, they asked me, do you want to come full time? And before I said, well, okay, now I'm ready. I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable with all these aspects now. And so I went full time 4 months ago now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's get into it then, because as you can tell, you know what this stands for?
Is that
it's Kidney Health? It's Kidney Health Month.
Yeah.
National Kidney Awareness Month. So,
well, what does the green have to do with anything?
I mean,
I don't make up the colors.
Red makes sense. So, all right, fine.
You kind of picked a niche audience, right? With high blood pressure, like how many? A billion people affected, 1 in every 2 Americans.
Yeah, right, exactly. 1.4 billion, 130 million now. Americans.
Right. So there's a big need. So just tell us about what you do and what your company does.
Yeah. So you guys know this very well, but hypertension, as you just mentioned, is the world's most common chronic disease, and it's generally quite poorly managed. I mean, generally, if you look at all the statistics globally, control rates of hypertension, despite having cheap and ready medications and known interventions, globally control rates are 20%. U.S. control rates 26%, and so. Yeah, it's astounding, right? We have all this data and knowledge. We know how to treat it, but it just doesn't happen. And a lot of that has to do with the practical nature of modern medicine and the sort of reactive nature of people come to us generally when there's a problem.
Sure.
But in hypertension, like in almost all chronic diseases, ideally you make an impact before there's a problem. And so a lot of that has to do with lack of data. Right? People don't use cuffs routinely. They've been around for 110 years, 50 years in the way that they are currently sold at every drugstore, but people just don't use them. Only 24% of people who have hypertension actually use a cuff more than once a week. And so it's sort of an astounding gap. And so part of the sort of rationale for our technology and our product and solution is to fill in gaps of monitoring and data delivery of hypertension so that we can really enable the whole sort of continuum of care from awareness, empowerment, engagement, diagnosis, treatment, and control in all aspects of hypertension. So the underlying technology is now essentially a continuous or a sort of persistent blood pressure monitor that is worn. This is actually part of the device.
Also, it is a wearable. It's a wearable.
It's part of the device. This is very simple stuff in here, very simple, but it's an optical sensor with two LED lights and an accelerometer. And what we get from that is a continuous set of data of blood pressure points of about 800 per month, about 200 a week. And all you have to do is wear it.
Is that accurate compared to like a regular?
Yeah, we've done numerous studies, and we have all our validation data is published, and we're approved in Europe, and have about 30,000 active users. And
do you know what I used to have to do to get continuous ambulatory blood pressure monitoring? You'd have to schedule the patient to go to the hospital. Someone has to put on the monitor.
Right.
You get like however long they'd wear it for. You'd have to wait to get a report. They'd have to take it off.
Correct.
It's so cumbersome.
So,
it's extremwould cumbersome.
So what other data? I mean, this is systolic, diastolic blood pressure. You're also getting heart rate, but not. I would imagine able to identify like AFib or something along those lines.
No, we really are very focused on hypertension and blood pressure, and so we really didn't want to make this like a multifunction, sensor.
And where does the data go? I mean, obviously, where is it being stored and how is it being analyzed?
So there's really the only place that the person's data is actually stored is on the firmware here on the device and in their app on their phone. What happens is that the optical signals are gathered here and then go through the Bluetooth connection to the phone, bounce to our cloud that is a secure cloud server, and then comes back to two places. One, to the user's interface on their phone. And secondly, the healthcare organization, it goes directly. They don't have to push anything. They don't have to email anyone. They don't have to send it in a portal message. If the organization is running our software, it'll automatically show up in their portal. And in one place, you'll be able to see all 100,000, 10,000 hypertensive patients in your organization and sort through them and
part of my job, like Clinton will say, besides just looking good all the time, that's a joke, is that, I do head our clinical research department or medical institution, and we part of that arm is, running clinical trials, education, GME, but it's also innovation. And so certainly so this is fascinating. All right. So you said it's approved in Europe. Even the small startup that I'm involved with is a European company. How has it been, or tell us a little bit about the trend of how it's being utilized in Europe, but then of course you wanting to get to the United States market, guy over the FDA. What is that like, and what does that process kind of entail?
Yeah. So I'll start with the second part first because it's a simpler answer. It's obviously that's like we see with almost all medical devices or new technologies. They're approved outside the U.S.
Yes,
because it's a much more permissive and sort of forward-thinking environment. In the FDA, there's a long, lengthy process. We're engaged with them already. Where we have to, go through a comprehensive risk-benefit analysis and present our data. And so I can't go too much into the detail, but the bottom line is we're engaged with the FDA, and It's an ongoing process.
So then are you looking for U.S. Medical centers, clinical sites then to get data that can be validated by the FDA? So it won't take data, or they might look at it, but they won't necessarily approve it by data from Europe. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Unlike coming to this from a cardiology background, and just from your guys' background too, is like we look at studies all the time where a medication is approved, and what they generally have to do are these large outcome studies, right? Generally, they'll show that there's some significant clinical benefit, and then make their argument to the FDA or other regulatory body. That doesn't exist for blood pressure devices. Never has. So almost nobody, and I didn't realize this either till I started doing this, that all cuffs are regulated medical devices too, and they have to have a 510(k) approval by the FDA.
Right.
They're class 2 medical devices, but nobody generally understands the validation process that a cuff goes through, and it's actually exceedingly simple and has nothing to do with clinical outcomes at all. All it has to do with is proving equivalence to another cuff within a range of error.
Right.
That's it. That's all it has to prove. It doesn't have to show intra-subject variability. They don't have to show, does it actually track blood pressure well over time?
Those studies will be much simpler to design than an execute.
They're super easy. And that's why there's, hundreds, thousands of cuffs been on the market. Sure. And so what we're finding as we're going through this regulatory process is that, fortunately and unfortunately, I think there's two sides to the coin, is that because we have a novel technology and we have a tremendous amount of data, but it's new type of data. It's not one point at one time measurements anymore. We have these sort of continuous data, and it's a really different. So we have the regulatory agencies are holding us to a different and much higher, more stringent standard than any cuff that's on the market. And so, is it unfair? I don't know. I'm not really. It's not my place to say, but I would just say that honestly, the data that we have and we show in our clinical trials, which are run all over the world, by the way, US and outside, actually has tremendously more data than any existing blood pressure cuff.
But I could literally go to your website and order it and have it shipped. Or I'm not you. I'm just saying, like, is it
not in the US?
You can't ship it to the US.
Well,
so I can't go to Alibaba and.
I think that's why it says join the wait list, right?
You can join the wait list in the US. If you're in Europe, yes, you can do what you just said, Clinton. You can just go on the website and order it directly.
Clinton didn't take the time to review the website, but I did.
I did.
How do you?
Wait. Let me ask a question.
Go ahead.
Because this is my thing, and I'm
very
interested. This is my baby.
Sure.
I'm passionate about this. What have you found any other use cases outside of? Because I can think of like white coat hypertension, just regular monitoring. Stable chronic hypertension, maybe like a post-hospitalization, CHF type of thing. Or at our hospital, we have a hospital at home, whatever that means. Any other use cases that you guys have?
Hospital at home, it would be a huge place for this because Medicare, it's a big initiative, right? For patients who can safely be discharged, saving money, especially bundled patients. So
I think I would say there's an unlimited number. So what you just mentioned, all true. So just routine, we're doing a major clinical outcomes study on the West Coast, looking at hypertension management with chronic hypertension with our device and solution versus standard of care. We have trials underway with groups that are doing post-stroke discharge. So after someone comes into a stroke unit, we know from a neurologic standpoint, they need their blood pressure controlled pretty well within at least the first 1 to 3 months. So we're doing a use case for that. I think for you, especially Clinton, it's like chronic kidney disease would be a super interesting use case. Long-term control of hypertension in people with stage 3 chronic kidney disease, who progresses, who doesn't.
Yeah.
And can we identify not just blood pressure range, but think about the other things we can do with 800 blood pressure data points a month. It's no longer looking at one blood pressure or an average even of blood pressure. Now we can start to calculate real time somebody's time in target range for blood pressure, which we know is a more potent predictor of clinical outcomes, but no existing technology can actually measure that. And so, so think about, for me, my history of thoracic aortic aneurysms. I mean, it's a critical input to, expanding aneurysms, coronary artery disease, stroke, I mentioned diabetes, on and on and on. There's,
you know what my technology is? My technology is having the elderly lady bring their list of blood pressure readings.
I know.
Or their monitor. And I say, oh, your blood pressure is high, really high in the morning. Take your antihypertensives at night. So I think the temporal relationship is important as well.
How do you analyze all this? I mean, you're getting so much data points. What are you using, once it gets deposited into your central repository for data collection? How does that being analyzed?
So there's a lot of ways to analyze it. I think for existing clinicians, to put it in the context that we all kind of can conceive of, the simplest sort of metrics that we derive from it are average weekly blood pressure. So doing what Clinton just did, which I did also for 10 years, I get a coffee stained napkin with like 4 readings, and we're trying to figure out what is this person's average blood pressure. Now it's so simple. Before that person even walks in the door, I have that answer.
Yeah.
So weekly average readings, time in target range, as we just mentioned, is a burgeoning and very powerful predictor. We already provide that to both the user and the patient. But then there's even more complex sort of data analysis that we can do. And at this point, it's probably more for on the research side. But we're looking at all these data. We have 30,000 active users in Europe. And when they log in and make their account, most of them give permission to look at their data for research purposes, de-identified. And what we can see is that patients segregate themselves into different groups, different patterns over the 24-hour period. But it's not just like Clinton mentioned, like a 24-hour period. We're looking at that 24-hour period now over 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year and beyond. And what do those patterns mean? How do they change? How do they relate to health outcomes? And so we're starting to do cohort studies in Europe, especially, where we have longitudinal data, imaging, lab, biomarkers, and health outcomes. And we can start to map this kind of very complex and unique data to, real, outcome endpoints.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I want to just, in the remaining time we have, just switch focus a little bit. And I'm sure a lot of listeners out there, not all our listeners are physicians, but the ones that are,
sure.
I'm sure, Jay, you're aware of this. There's the physician fire, financial independence, retire early, physician side gigs, entrepreneurship. Talk a little bit about, because I know you were also involved with angel investing. You're obviously a little bit entrepreneur as well, which is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about that and how that might fit in with other physicians who are, you mentioned, like ancillary income, additional revenue streams. It's, feeding both, fine financially, even academically, other interests. Like we've all realized that a arc of a physician's career doesn't have to be linear. There can be many different things.
Absolutely. I really think about it as one primary goal, for me at least personally, and this would be different for others, but to really, first of all, to continue to learn more in different aspects, in different ways. And we can talk about sort of the different types of investing that I've done, and that might be relevant. But the other thing is to give yourself freedom. Sure. Freedom from having to go to the same office every day, see the same 30 patients, do that again and again and again. And I know many physicians feel like they're trapped and they don't know what else to do. But they know they have to kind of keep this, hamster wheel going.
But you're right. They took so long to get here. And then they say,
but then in the end, you have a hard time slowing down that hamster wheel because it makes a certain income. You have to keep that income, or you want to keep that income, whatever the reason is. So what I started doing now 5 years ago, I started really looking at how can you make your money and your income work for you?
Sure.
Not just put it away, not just put it in some stock market thing, or how can you make it work for you?
Right.
And so, and that not to build this giant wealth fund or something, but really to give you freedom.
Sure.
So if you did want to cut down to 3 days a week, or you wanted to take afternoons off, you didn't feel that pressure. And I know I felt that in prior practice. When I would go on vacation, I would feel like this strange sense of guilt, like, my income's going to go down.
Or you get the Sunday scaries when you come back. And
I have
the Friday scaries because I'm on call all weekend and have to round the hospital while Clinton is playing golf. I know, I know you don't have any.
That pharmacopoeia is going to be just on fire, right? Looking up all
got
those
a lot of things going on here, but
gram positives. So you have to let us know when the device comes to the States, because I think it'd be a great idea for me to wear one and see how my blood pressure goes up and down depending on what I'm co-hosting
based on how much time you spend with me.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel we should have you come back and maybe talk something specifically about investing. And
happy to.
I think there's obviously no shortage of interest. We know that medicine has changed dramatically, but I like what you said that, by having able to slow down, and some people saying, I took 2 days off from seeing patients, I'm actually a better doctor for it. I'm happier. I still love medicine.
Absolutely.
There's obviously a big disconnect between medicine as we study and the practice of, right? There's a huge disconnect, but
totally.
We'd love to have you come back on, discuss that as a whole different episode. But tell us a little bit about where listeners can find you, professionally, socially, the company website.
Sure. Yeah. So all the social handles are at Aktiia Global. So across all social platforms. Of course, the Aktiia website is www.aktia.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And certainly for your listeners, I'd be happy to interact. And
I gotta get on LinkedIn. All the cool people are on LinkedIn.
So Clinton is still on MySpace.
I'm still on MySpace. I don't know
why, what he's doing
and
on there.
Friendster. Remember Friendster?
What you're doing with those TikTok videos with those Chinese kids. I don't know what you're doing over there, but you need to get all.
Sounds great. You guys.
I feel like we could talk a lot more. I really would love for you to actually come back.
I'd love to come back and talk about investing. There's so many.
That would be really fascinating.
All right, so that's part 2, the investment.
There's got to be a part 2, as well as updates with
early retirement for CC. Yes.
Dr. J. Shah, we really appreciate you coming on our show today, talking about your career arc, about all this great work you're doing, how you're utilizing your expertise, and then really, satisfying your creative outlets, showing how a physician's art can be in multiple ways. I will finish by saying yesterday, I gave a career day talk to my kids' middle school. And, what I was trying to show them and tell them was the same idea that, hey, physicians can do a lot of different things. And I was showing them some things different things that I do. And there was zero interest from these middle school kids, but maybe if you spoke, they would have better luck. So, but certainly you impress all of us, and I'm sure all of our listeners. So thank you so much for coming on, talking to myself, talking to my kidney month wearing a badge friend over here, Dr. Clenton Coleman. As always, Dr. Suraj, Saggar, Recommend Daily Dose. If you like what you heard, rate, listen, and subscribe. Please check out Dr. J. Shah. We look forward to hearing more from him in the future. Until next time, be well.